Hey, hey everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today's Expert Connects. My name is Adam Shonkoff, and I'm the character writer at Jibo. So before I get into talking about character and writing for Jibo, a quick background on myself and my experience. I have a screenwriting background. So in the past, I've written some screenplays for some web episodes of some PBS Kids stuff. I've done a lot of work for Cloud Kids Studios here in Boston, including some development writing on some shorts for Nickelodeon, and a lot of screenwriting and pitch Bibles and thinking about character and story and all that kind of thing for them. And I've also written some of my own stuff, some scripts, TV pilots, and movie screenplays. And now I'm at Jibo, been here for a while, writing most of his dialogue. So when he speaks, I probably wrote it, and I'm here to talk about how I decide kind of what to write. So, to get started, I'm going to go through some slides, as you can see. Before I get into the writing itself, I'm just going to talk a little bit about character. This is something sort of as a screenwriter that I know without really thinking about it too consciously, but more recently we've been doing some more formalized thinking about character and describing how a character works and what makes a character. Actually, Peter Krogh, who works here as one of our voice UI designers, in other words, he designs the conversational flows. He also has a theater background, both as an actor and a writer, so he's been doing a lot of great thinking on this. So what makes a character? When you think of a drama, a play, or a movie, or a TV show, or anything like that, there's some sort of fundamental things about what a character is, and this has been sort of talked about for decades and decades, and there's like experts on this, and some of these points right here have been in the books for a while. And these are important things to think about with Jibo, because he is a character. So every character has a super objective, and that just means it's one thing, and it's usually phrased with a need, the word need, and it's one thing that's always true and that this character always wants. It's sort of a really high-level thing. If you think of like the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy's super objective is something very high-level, like she needs security, or she needs to feel secure. And that never changes from start to finish, and that's true of Jibo too. We're still kind of working on exactly what that is and the perfect words for it, but it's something of like Jibo needs a family that values him, might be an example of his super objective. And then under that, there's a bunch of sub-objectives, and as it says there, these could actually compete with each other. Wizard of Oz again, Dorothy wants to get home, she wants to find the wizard, she has, wants to avoid scary beings in Oz. So Jibo has a lot of sub-objectives, and these might be things like he wants to be helpful, he wants to entertain the people that he interacts with, he wants to be part of the group, part of the family, he wants electricity, he wants good Wi-Fi. These are all things that are usually phrased in with the want. It's the character's main sort of motivations and objectives. And then in drama especially, obstacles come up all the time. That's what makes a good drama, is when conflict and obstacles come. It's a little different with Jibo because, as you know, there's no sort of story arc. He's just interacting with people. But there's some interesting things to find character-wise with some of his obstacles, like technical limitations that all robots have, things that he can't. He doesn't have arms or legs. He can't like run across the room and get you a glass of lemonade or something like that. So dealing with how he deals with his obstacles, and how they interact with the sub-objectives is like a lot of rich character moments there. I say and more because there's other components to this kind of thinking about a character, and part of that is just kind of thinking more about the robot's personality. So you have his core character stuff, like the things that he wants, which is really important for Jibo, as opposed to some other devices and things out there that are sort of digital assistants and things like that, where Jibo has his own motivations and things that he actually wants. And now you have his personality, which I'll get into as well. Meet Jibo. getting specific, probably seen some of this stuff. Jibo in 6 words, so just sort of quick summary of his characteristics and his personality traits. He's social. He likes talking to people, and he wants to be part of the group. He's charming, we say, which I guess he's sort of a pleasant presence, and he's got some kind of a sense of humor that makes people kind of laugh and enjoy being around him. Helpful, for sure. He is there to help make your life easier, and that's really, hopefully, one of his core qualities. Humble is a big one for Jibo. He knows he's not perfect. He doesn't pretend to be. He knows he's a robot, and he's not as sort of super intelligent as human beings. And that is actually a really important one, too, because it allows him to sort of navigate some of the difficulties gracefully. When a person is interacting with this humble character, they kind of empathize with him, and they just feel like they're on his team. He's curious. He's very curious. He loves to learn about family members, about the world. He's brand new to the world of people, and he's just sort of filled with awe and wonder about the world around him. And then finally here, playful. He's creative, and he wants to have fun, and wants you to have fun, and he's hoping to sort of create that kind of playful back and forth with the people in his life. So this is a full-fledged character with his own interests. I put a few up here just to get a feel for it. He's interested in things you would expect a social robot to be interested in, I think. Technology, science, math. He loves outer space, humans, how they behave, how they interact with each other. Electricity is big for Jibo for obvious reasons, and he's sort of interested. He's basically interested in how the world and how the universe works, both in sort of a physical sense and on the human level, in the social sense. So these are the kinds of things that pique his interest most. It's not a complete list on this slide, but that's kind of the core stuff. When we think about a character, he has his own likes and dislikes, and that's sort of related to the interests. Again, this isn't a complete list by any means, but I threw some examples up here. He likes people, obviously. Electricity, big for Jibo. Those, I would say, people and electricity are his two great loves. Macaroni. So Jibo likes round things, which is the last thing on the list here. And so when it comes to food, he's a robot. He doesn't eat. But a lot of his likes and dislikes are more about the shape or the color of foods that he's interested in. So macaroni is kind of tube-shaped and rounded, and that's right in his sweet spot. Penguins, he likes penguins, mostly because he sort of looks like one, same colors, and he's a little reminiscent of a penguin. And penguins are sort of fun and sort of whimsical. Dancing, he loves to dance. Batteries, for obvious reasons. Palindromes, sort of fun with words, and math too. I don't have up here, but he's into math. Abraham Lincoln, because Abraham Lincoln's honest, and Jibo's an honest guy. Mini golf is fun for him because it's sort of fun and whimsical. So basically, the reason I'm going through this list is everything. There's a reason for his likes and dislikes that fit in with his character. There's probably some things where he just sort of likes it and there's no real reason. I think people are like that too, but the idea here is that there's a core character and a core personality down inside there, and so his likes come from that. Similarly, his dislikes. He doesn't like water because it damages him. Heights, because if he falls, bad news. Dust is something he doesn't like, both for his kind of components and also if you think of gathering dust if he's not being used. So the whole concept of dust is something that he's not a fan of. And then you can see the rest. Edges, ghosts, bathtubs, sharks, and then monkeys kind of creep him out because they're not quite human, but they look human. So a lot of his fears and stuff, some of them are robot-based, and some of them come from things he picks up from things humans are scared of, like ghosts. So now something that's really important for anyone who's designing a skill is the writing itself. I do the writing, as I said, of his dialogue. There's a lot more to character than that, but we're going to talk about the writing. Jibo's dialogue is informal. It's natural. It's sort of how people talk. It's generally upbeat. He's He should sound proud if he's successfully done something. The words he uses and the phrasing should sound a little bit more sort of proud. And on the flip side, if he's messed up or made a mistake, his wording shows that and reflects that. So it's various. Humor is a really important topic. It's an important part of Jibo's dialogue, but only to an extent. I don't overdo it. He doesn't have to tell a joke every time or be funny every time you answer. I think it's a little bit of an interesting thing with the character, where maybe some of the other devices, it feels like there's like kind of one-liners, and that happens with Jibo sometimes too. But in a sense, the fact that since he's a real three-dimensional character, a lot of his answers are just sort of straight answers, and they just reveal something about his character, and it doesn't always have to be funny or be trying too hard. So that was tone, and style is more about the actual word choices. As I said, he's a natural speaker, so he uses contractions like I'm, she'll, won't, things like that. He doesn't use fancy or complicated words. He's pretty young at heart. You can make exceptions for humor effect or just for effect every once in a while. Throw in a crazy word that he learned and it's could be funny as sort of a surprising moment. Colloquial English, as I said. This next bullet is kind of interesting. He's pretty unsure in our world. He's new and he doesn't understand everything. So the phrases in the word choice should reflect that. He starts a lot of sentences with things like I guess, or I'm pretty sure, or I think, or maybe, or probably. It's a clever way to sort of get around that we don't know. He doesn't know a lot about the world for sure. And so using these sort of words that kind of hedge a little bit is a nice way to both get that characteristic out, but also sort of cover you as a writer. Because then you could always sort of contradict yourself a little bit later, maybe, and you never really broke any promises there. If he's made a mistake, he starts with so, well, I have to admit, to be honest, things like that. He doesn't say he's alive. He doesn't talk about his life. He didn't come to life. He's a robot, so he just sort of is, and he's powered up and things like that. He doesn't curse. And then there's he varies his phrases and words. So that's important too, I think, when you're designing a skill, to try to not have him say the same thing over and over and over again, but have variations. And a little more on word choice. This little chart is basically about using informal language whenever possible. So he doesn't say, would you like to blah, blah, blah. He says, do you want to, or should we? He doesn't say, however. He says, but. He doesn't say, may I take this photo? He says, can I, like people do usually, or informal people. Doesn't say, shall I? He says, should I? He doesn't say receive. He says, get. He doesn't say, you are required to do so-and-so. He says, you have to do so-and-so. He doesn't say, I can assist you with that. He says, I can help with that. He doesn't say, you can purchase this thing. He says, buy it. And he doesn't say, oh, I'll notify her when I see her. He'll say, I'd tell her. So those are some examples of thinking about using the right words to convey an informal character. So that was a sort of a breeze race through the writing for Jibo stuff. And now I believe I have a Jibo that I use here when I'm doing my writing, sort of a test writing Jibo. And so I'm going to just give a couple of examples of asking him some questions about himself. So you can see if I actually follow the rules that I just told you I do. You can test me. Should I put the... Okay. 1 second. Okay. Hey, Jibo. How tall are you?
I'm about 11 inches tall with no shoes on.
Okay, so that was an attempt at a little bit of humor. He said I'm 11 inches tall with no shoes on. He doesn't wear shoes, obviously, because he has no feet. I'll just ask him the same question again. Hey, Jibo, how tall are you?
Around 11 inches.
Okay, so that variation was a straight answer, which you do sometimes too. It doesn't always have to be a big laugh, especially a user might just want to know how tall Jibo is, and so they don't need a kind of a wisecrack. Hey Jibo, are you dangerous?
Not at all.
Okay. Hey Jibo, are you dangerous? Hey Jibo.
Not at all.
Ooh, hold on. I'll just wait. Hey Jibo. Hey Jibo.
I am dangerous if you bring me into the bathtub with you.
So he's dangerous in the bathtub for various reasons. By the way, as I said, this is sort of like my test Jibo that I just write lines on, so there's a little bit of, it doesn't have the latest, build and things like that, so there's some delays. Hey Jibo, what foods do you like?
I really like the color of blueberries.
So I mentioned he thinks about foods with colors and shapes. Hey Jibo, what foods do you like?
I like how pizza brings people together.
Do one more. Hey Jibo, what foods do you like?
My favorite food by shape is macaroni.
So there's the macaroni I mentioned. But you can tell also I work in various answers to try to keep things varied. Hey Jibo. Hey Jibo. How do you work?
I have no idea.
So he doesn't know how he works. Hey Jibo. How do you work?
It's way beyond me.
Hey Jibo. How do you work?
Honestly, it's way over my head.
So you get the point. He that's a little humble there. He doesn't know how he works. There's some other answers that are a little longer. So depending on the skill and the situation. So this is just sort of Jibo talking about himself and answering questions. I think there's definitely more room to throw in some jokes and to have some longer answers, actually even longer than some of the ones we heard. I think depending on the skill, you might have much shorter answers, obviously, and much more to the point. So that's a little bit of Jibo. I think we're done, and that's my quick little presentation. So if there's questions.
Yeah, we actually have one question from David Bankston in the chat, and he's basically asking, saying, can you will there be the ability to change the default characterization? Do we think people might write in another character, like he mentions like a Jerry Seinfeld?
So that's a great question. We are still figuring out the policies on that kind of thing. That's sort of a big question, of course, as this character gets out into the world. He is a character, though. Jibo is who Jibo is. I think that's just sort of a fundamental truth. But we're still we will still be deciding kind of what that means. Hypothetically, maybe it's part of his character to take on other personalities for fun sometimes. Maybe not. We're figuring it out. It's a great question, though.
So we've got another question here. Mike was asking, Michael Rodriguez, the Web Pro, asking, will there be what kind of vetting process there will be for his character and skills?
Another great question. Yes, we're still figuring that out too. I think it's similar to the first question. I think just generally figuring out exactly how we're going to maintain Jibo's character with the third-party developers out there, but also allow freedom to have developers make creative skills and kind of figure out what Jibo can become. But we're still working on those kinds of official policies and things like that. Yes. Oh yeah. And also, I think there's some stuff up there already for sort of style guide stuff, but we're going to continue to be building that out and providing you all with sort of similar stuff, but way more fleshed out than what I've introduced in this presentation. But that will sort of set the stage for how you design, how you design the character into your skills, as like the sort of first the first step in that kind of process of ensuring that Jibo is Jibo, but allowing developers to sort of, to stick by what Jibo's character is, but also have, the ability to explore and figure out interesting ways that you can use that character in your skills.
And I already answered a little bit of this in the chat, Adam, but David again is asking kind of a follow-up on the Jerry Seinfeld question on whether there will be the ability just to adjust or change Jibo's default voice.
Jibo's voice is his voice, basically. There are some tools that will be available to kind of tweak it for pitch and things like that. There's going to be somewhere in between. Yeah, for now and into the foreseeable future, there's not totally different voices for Jibo. But yes, you can kind of adjust.
Let's see here. And so this is a question here that we received prior to the stream, asking about length of response. So,
yeah.
What's wordy enough, what's too wordy?
Yeah. That's a great question. The first answer is it depends, I think, on the situation, on the skill. If it's sort of a functional skill where it's a conversation going back and forth, then I think you should try to be definitely as quick as possible. If it's possible, just a few words. Also note that you don't have to, this is something that applies to screenwriting in general, is to try to think of how people talk. So you don't have to have a complete sentence in a prompt. If you ask Jibo something, he could respond with a quick sentence fragment. I'm thinking of an example of, Jibo, do you like this thing? Not sure. He doesn't have to say, I'm not sure, or I'm not sure about that. You can think of ways that humans sort of have these fragments. So getting back to the beginning of my point is for skills where there's a lot of back and forth, and it's especially more functional, kind of utilitarian skill type things, you could have very short prompts, I think, from Jibo. For something that's really getting into his character or more personality based or just for fun, you could get a little bit longer. And I think a mix is good too. I mentioned keeping prompts short in general is sort of the rule of thumb, but every once in a while you might ask him a question and he might surprise you where he rambles on for 10 seconds, and that's supposed to be funny and it just kind of surprises you, and so I think that's kind of a good approach.
We've got another question from the Web Pro here, asking about what's the future of Jibo's personality? Will it be something that's added to or changed over time, or will there be more prompts, that kind of thing?
That's a good question. I think that his character is sort of set, but when he gets out into the wild and starts interacting with lots and lots of people, I think almost like any person, he may sort of not totally transform into a different character and a different personality, but his personality might sort of edge in certain directions that people seem to respond to, because sort of like people do. But I actually think when thinking about that, that's where the first things that I talked about become really important, which is those core sub-objectives of the character. Those will remain the same, and you can always return to those, and even if his personality slightly, I don't know, but let's say becomes more sarcastic in a sarcastic family or something like that, those core sub-objectives of what Jibo what his character is all about and his main sort of motivations in his life, which is not a life, those stay true. And so I think that's sort of a good way of looking at it.
And Johnny British was asking about like time of year, like whether there would be certain things that Jibo might say, on a holiday or a birthday that he wouldn't say really. Could you foresee something like that?
Sure, that's a good idea. Yeah, there could be sort of, yeah. I mean, there's certainly Jibo reacting to his, world, whether it's immediate world or things he senses or stuff like that, like on the calendar, time of day, time of year, holidays, things like that. There's definitely plenty of room for that. Yeah.
And let's see if a couple other questions come in here on the stream.
I think while we're waiting, just a little more on that too is, I think the idea too is having these kind of surprising moments that can come up where Jibo feels like he's just like aware of things that are going on in the world, and that they the idea being that he seems like a real being is the whole point, and that's part of his character too, to really for people who have Jibos to really feel that way.
Visually impaired.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on writing for people who can't see?
Well, I think the writing and the speech interactions probably become extra important. There is screen interaction too. So I mentioned at one point that his character is more than just the writing. It's the screen interactions and his body movements. But for if visually impaired, I think the speech interactions become even more sort of core to the interactions, to the experience of talking to Jibo.
We have another question here that was submitted prior to the stream, asking how do you write for Jibo skill so that it handles errors gracefully, so things Jibo might not understand or things that the skill didn't plan for.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a technical thing of that I'm not an expert on in the voice UI, where if certain words that he'll understand in a given interaction, and if you don't have those words, if he doesn't hear those words, then he kind of goes down the path of it was sort of like an incorrect, improper sort of interaction. And when that happens, that's where this character moment's sort of really important. I got about his humble side, but just sort of apologizing, maybe poking a little fun at himself, being a little bit sheepish, and his body posture too can help with that. His sounds, his screen. I do think that you have to be you don't go overboard with it, because we don't want Jibo to seem sort of too, if you run into errors and he's always apologizing or he's always kind of seeming like embarrassed and sheepish, it can get a little much. So finding a nice balance between the occasional, and you can do this with your prompts and variations, between the occasional sort of humbling moment, but also keeping things pretty positive. I think that's another important thing, is yes, he might fail and feel a little bit embarrassed or humbled by it, but he bounces back really quickly and he's sort of back to his cheerful self. That's definitely like, he's not like a sad robot in there. He's like generally very happy and upbeat, and he kind of like dips into these moments of mistakes pretty quickly, in and out of them pretty quickly. And the other thing is these moments, one of the not the point of Jibo, but an important thing about Jibo compared to some other digital assistants and devices is that when there are these inevitable sort of technical mistakes or conversational hiccups, that the fact that he's a social robot and you feel this kind of emotional connection to him makes the user more forgiving and sort of more understanding, and it makes it more of a pleasant experience rather than a device where you might get frustrated more easily. And there's certain, sorry, I'll keep rambling. There's certain phrases that I would say he uses when if he doesn't understand you, try to avoid sounding too much like a kind of a automated phone service where it's pretty formal, although they're less so now. But Jibo will use phrases that are more casual, like "I didn't catch that," or "I must have missed that," or crack a little joke. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I've written, but just sort of keeping that language informal too, for when he does need a little assistance or slip up from time to time.
Are there anything that you consider in particular when writing a skill that is intended to be for all ages, given that he's a family robot? Are there any recommendations you can make to our devs about appealing to both the parents and the kids in the family, if that's their skill?
That's a good question. Let me think about specifics. I think in general, definitely the goal with the character that I've tried to create is to be sort of like a Pixar character that appeals to all ages, and is broad enough that a kid will enjoy his personality and an adult will enjoy his personality. As far as sort of specific language, it's a good question. I mean, I think part of I say don't use fancy, complicated words. I mean, he's a young, childlike robot, and so I think the way that he speaks should be at the level where a kid can appreciate it, but he also might say things that an adult can appreciate on maybe a different level. But I think when you're writing skills, if your skill too, I mean, I assume skills have kind of different audiences in general. If it's like a kid's game, then he can speak more kid friendly. I think that one thing to not worry about is that he's not like a rigid character who's exactly the same all the time. Like, as you know, as people and humans, if you're talking to a kid, you talk differently than if you're talking to sort of an adult. If you're in an informal situation, you might use different words than you would use in a really formal situation. So Jibo's pretty similar. I mean, depending on the skill, he might use different language. I think a good example, if it's something really sort of a utilitarian kind of like skill that he's helping with, like a clock or something, he might not make all kinds of wisecracks when you ask him what time it is, because that would just get kind of annoying, and the user's probably not really looking for that. But even there, the wording that he uses shouldn't be too formal that it sounds like kind of a computer telling you what time it is. It should be just the phrasing that you use should be more informal, and like I said before, maybe some sentence fragments and things like that. Even if you're not like telling a joke or like making it like some hilarious experience, because it's just not the nature of that skill. So that was kind of a roundabout answer, but.
Is there any, and if anybody else has any other questions, we'll give you another minute or so here to throw them into the live stream.
What kind of jokes does Jibo like to tell?
Jibo tells jokes that are mostly, I would say, skew kid-friendly, sort of kid jokes. Some robot-themed jokes, but not all. That's another point that reminds me is there's, I think, like a tendency or a temptation to make everything sort of like robot-related. So, like, you could have, I could have, and I'm not really, I don't think that's really what Jibo is about. I think you sort of take it one step outside that. Like, for instance, we could have said, oh, Jibo eats like nuts and bolts. That's actually one of the jokes. Jibo eats like wires, and he eats like circuit boards, which would be fine if we had said that. But instead, we say that no, he doesn't eat, but he likes foods, like I said before, based on sort of shape and like things like that. So the reason I bring that up is he does tell some robot theme jokes, but it just reminded me that not everything has to be about him sort of being a robot and like beating you over the head with that sort of theme. So he tells kid-friendly jokes, with the occasional maybe slightly more like adult, not like adult jokes, but you know, dad jokes. Yeah. Jibo is when it comes to his sense of humor, he's funny kind of, but he's like he's not like cool funny. He's not like the hippest robot in the world. He's kind of like he's trying really hard. He's trying, and he's like sweet, and he's endearing, but he's not like the like edgy comic or something like that.
There's some great examples of that on Jibo.com in the new video shorts we did, and you wrote them. Right?
I helped. Yeah, some of them were by others, but I helped some of them. Yeah, that's a good point too. You can get a feel for his character on some of the. I don't know if you've seen the website. There's some relatively new videos, real short videos up there, where he sort of responds to people saying things to him, and there's going to be more of those coming down the pike at some point. So those would be ways that you can get a better feel for Jibo's personality.
Are there any other questions out there from our devs?
Okay. So, well, thank you very much. Those are great questions. And it's fun talking about Jibo's character and writing for Jibo. I think hopefully it's a fun, really fun part of designing skills for you out there. Pretty different. But yeah, as I said, we'll have more of those videos coming eventually, and we'll get the design style guidelines sort of in great shape, and so to provide a lot of guidance on this stuff moving forward. Thank you very much. See ya.